Hello, and welcome to Gaston Spotlight. I'm your host, Justin Olmsted, and our guest today is Sherry Reinhardt. Thanks for being on the show today, Sherry.
Well, thank you so much for having me today.
It's my pleasure. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization you work for?
I can. I work for the Lincoln County Coalition Against Child Abuse and Child Advocacy Center. And we're a two-part organization. The Coalition Against Child Abuse is responsible for preventing child abuse and helping people to be able to identify and report child abuse. And we teach children about safety and internet safety, and we go out and do classes for adults and daycares and school teachers, because in North Carolina is a law now that school teachers must have that education every 2 years. So we go out and provide that education because, of course, we want to prevent all child abuse. The Child Advocacy Center is also underneath that umbrella of the coalition, and we provide services to children when they've been identified as abused or neglected. Child Advocacy Center is a multidisciplinary team approach between the law enforcement and social services, which is responsible, both parties, for investigating child abuse, and the district attorney's office, which prosecutes. Our medical providers, which provide medicals for children that may have experienced child abuse, and evidence-based mental health systems to assist in the healing and justice for children. So we're a two-part organization that surrounds children with services when they've been identified as abused or neglected.
Right on. Well, it sounds like there are a lot of services that you can provide for
Yes.
children and families of children.
Yes.
Now, is there any cost for any of the services that you provide?
No. Services for children who've been abused has to remain free. Also, our services for education are free. So there's never a cost tied, or will we ever ask for an insurance card or Medicare. All of the services are free, including mental health services, victim advocacy, forensic interviews, therapy dog, which goes in the interviews, and therapist. Nothing is charged.
Wow. Well, I'd really personally like to thank you for all those services. That's a great thing. Now, how many children are reported abused or neglected annually in Lincoln County?
Well, nationally, the statistics for child abuse is 1 in 10 and before the age of 18. And that's kind of shocking because as a nation, we're kind of behind on seeing child abuse as a health issue for children. But if you had children experiencing cancer 1 in 10, it would most certainly be considered a health issue. And those numbers translate down to Lincoln County. Lincoln County had about 2,100 children, a little more than that, reported, which is about 10% of our youth population, so 1 in 10. A Child Advocacy Center takes reports from social services and law enforcement, which in North Carolina, everyone is a mandated reporter. So if you live in North Carolina and you suspect child abuse, it's the law that you must report. So when a child is reported, then we take referrals from social services and law enforcement to multidisciplinary team effect that surrounds that kid, instead of them having to go to social services to do an interview, and then to law enforcement, and then to the district attorney, and then the parents having to navigate mental health and not really knowing about the system of law enforcement and courts. A Child Advocacy Center brings all those services and surrounds the family so that they don't navigate the system, which produces a better outcome for families to stay the course of a case.
Okay. And now, while we're talking about reporting cases, are there any red flags or warning signs that someone may notice that a child is being abused or neglected?
Absolutely. So we know our children, and if our children are talkative and all of a sudden that behavior changes and they're kind of more secluded, staying in their room, or the other way around. If our children are generally pretty well behaved and they start acting out and having some behaviors, now that's language. So we want to just ask those questions. Hey, is anything wrong? Has anybody ever done anything to hurt you? Also, physical signs. If you see bruises, or if a child has knowledge, if a 4-year-old maybe uses terminology that an adult would use in a sexual manner, if they shouldn't know it, they shouldn't know it. If a child loves to go to karate or football or baseball or school and all of a sudden they don't want to go there anymore, it's always worth asking a question. And if you have a suspicion that something's happening, you don't need to know for sure. You just have to have a suspicion that says, hey, I want you to check this out. I always tell folks, I'm not a plumber, so if I go turn the water on and the water doesn't come out, I'm not going to crawl under there and look. And that's the same way with abuse. Mm-hmm. Reporting child abuse is simply asking someone who is a professional, social services or law enforcement, to come out and take a look because they're concerns.
Okay. Now, for example, if a teacher or other faculty or staff member does notice some of those warning signs or red flags, what would you recommend as a first step they could take to reach out or report an issue?
Of course, everyone is a mandated reporter, so as a school personnel, I'm sure you'll follow their policy, but also you're responsible as that person. So I'm Sherry Reinhardt, I'm a school teacher. So I have a responsibility as Sherry Reinhardt, but I'm also going to follow my protocols as Sherry Reinhardt, school teacher. So just, talking with the child, not asking specific questions, maybe always open-ended. Is there something you're worried about?
Okay.
Is there anybody that's done something that worries you? And then make sure you take notes, don't rely on your memory, and report it.
Okay. Do you have any experience working as a teacher?
I do. I taught school for 20 years. I taught children who were severe and profound developmental delays. And in 2009, I took the position of Executive Director of the Lincoln County Child Advocacy Center.
Okay. Now, talking about the Advocacy Center, are there any team members that you work with that you would like to give a special shout out that play a big role in with the services you provide? Absolutely.
The Lincoln County Sheriff's Department detectives that do our cases, we have a few, Detective Kelsey Harrington, Detective Jerry Talbot, Detective Frank Runyon, the City Police, Detective John Probst, Brian Green, Chief Jordan, they're all part of our team, and Social Services. Executive Director Matt Hillman of Lincoln County Social Services and his wonderful team, Kelly Miles of Social Services, and Mike Miller, which is the District Attorney for Lincoln County.
Okay.
And Atrium helps us out by providing a SANE nurse, which does sexual assault kits if a child shows up at the emergency room. So it takes a big team to surround children with services.
Well, with that big team, I know it's got to take quite a bit of funding to make all the stuff happen. How do you, as an organization, receive funding?
Okay, we are nationally accredited. North Carolina has over 40 accredited child advocacy centers. And if you are accredited, you will receive funding at current from the Governor's Crime Commission, which is state funding. And it goes by formula, how much you receive, depending on how many cases you do. We also recently got an increase in funding because of some cuts within the federal funding system from our state representatives in the Department of Human Health Services. They increased our funding. Jason Sane is a representative of Lincoln County, and he and other bipartisan folks within the state got together and tried to fill in the gaps for child advocacy centers. But you will find most child advocacy centers fundraising as well. We have a fundraiser that we've been doing for 17 years at the Child Advocacy Center coming up on March the 11th. And it's a spoof of The Price is Right for fighting child abuse. And we actually play the game. We have the life-size Plinko, big wheel, and for $10 you can come down and win a spectacular prize. And those funds are non-discretionary funds, so I can use them for mental health or medical or to fill in a gap where a child may come in that's been removed from a drug-endangered environment, and the clothes they have on, they're not able to take because of chemicals, or they may need a new pair of shoes or a coat, or a family has been displaced and we need to help place them somewhere. So the funds that we get from fundraising help to provide a holistic approach in taking care of the needs of that family and child.
Awesome. So now if somebody's watching at home and they would like to volunteer to help with any of the services you provide, or maybe even report an issue that's going on, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
You can go to our website, which is www.cac-lincolncounty.org, and our phone number is listed there, a volunteer application. But if you need to report child abuse, you report it to your local social services or sheriff's department. So in North Carolina, whatever county, I live in Gaston County, so I would report to Gaston County if the child lived there. Charlotte would report to Mecklenburg. So you report the county that you're in for any type of suspicion. And you don't have to give your name. Some people are uncomfortable giving their name. You can. If I called up and said, hey, I have a suspicion my neighbor next door's 2-year-old is outside in shorts and no shoes and it's 30 degrees, and I want someone to check that out, my name is Sherry Reinhardt. They will, if I give my name, they will let me know if that report is substantiated or unsubstantiated. But by no means do you ever have to give your name.
Okay. Well, before we wrap things up, is there any last thing that you wanted to mention before we end today's show?
I would. I want us to remember as a nation, a community, that adults are responsible for children. So it is our job to keep them safe. And we can't investigate our way out of child abuse after it's already happening. We have to look at it and be aware of it and think about it as just something as a safety. So years ago, we didn't wear seat belts. But when I got in the car today, I can't think back of when I reached up and went click. Can you think back?
No.
It's something that we do.
Right.
For safety, it's who we are.
It's almost automatic.
It's automatic. And I encourage the community to think of reporting child abuse that same way. It's something that we do. We look out for children to keep them safe.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Sherry, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We'll see you next time on Gaston Spotlight.